Hey guys, welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. It's Thursday night, which means it's time for another edition of the Workshop Podcast Live. And tonight is extra special. Not only is it the launch of a brand new series called REPAIREDNESS, autocorrect change that to preparedness there. Hey, Carrie Brown, how are you? Nice to see you, buddy. Um, we're going to feature tonight a deep dive into the systems that run your home, the skills, the tools, the materials required to do the repairs yourself when help isn't around the corner or even when it might be. So before we dive in, got a couple of pieces of housekeeping to get out of the way. This is a little bit new. We're streaming tonight on 4 different platforms, obviously YouTube and Float, Odyssey as well. And tonight in what we'll touch on a little bit more in a minute, but the Prepper Broadcast Network, everything. This is an exciting avenue for me. So anyway, so first off, for everybody who's listening for the first time on the Prepper Broadcast Network, or, you don't know who I am, or you want to know a little bit more about me, easiest way to check that out is toolmantim.co. That's toolmantim.co. Run by there. You'll see the monthly newsletter. You'll find all of my social media links. You can check me out on Float, on MeWe, Instagram, Facebook, Odyssey, YouTube. Anyway, I'm sure I forgot a few, but for what it's worth, it's all there. As well, I've got a little section called the shop, and it is where I've got over 100 products that I've used in my handyman business that have either made me money or saved me money. And it looks like we might have, give me just one second here, guys. On live now. There we go. So I've got a new piece of software tonight, so I really apologize if it's not coming through the way it was supposed to here. Everything seems to be, says I'm live on my end, so hopefully everybody can hear me. Oh, perfect. All right, great. Awesome. Sorry, guys, for the technical difficulties. We always have bats in the belfry here when I get started, so right on. Cool. Anyway, so if you want to know more about me, toolmantim.co. And second, I got to say, thank you to James. This is, my wife has heard me talk about this like crazy all week. I haven't been this excited about an opportunity, and I couldn't even tell you how long. But being invited to be part of the creator community and the greater community that is the Prepper Broadcast Network, it gives me chills. I am so damn excited. So anyway, this is great to be able to bring the workshop community over here and to overlap. And the best way to learn and to move forward is to come together as community. So James, and to all the other creators on PBN, thank you guys very much. And finally, number 3, get this one out of the way too. Feel free to ask questions. I love to interact. I want to be accessible. I'll try to answer what I can in the live stream. And if you want to follow up with me afterwards on social media, totally great as well. All right, so let's dive in to tonight's topic. And so we're going to talk about preparedness, and that whole idea, that's a phrase that I guess I coined. I've Googled it, couldn't find it anywhere else, but the whole idea behind it is home maintenance, being able to look after your bug-in location by yourself when help isn't around the corner. So having the tools on hand, having the gear on hand, having construction equipment, and also having the skills. So first off, and this is going to be the introduction episode tonight. We're just going to kind of touch on the high points of what we're going to touch on over the next few weeks, more like few months. But anyway, I've got so much content for you guys. I'm excited. So I guess first off, for those who aren't familiar with who I am, they're probably like, well, hey, who is this ugly fella if you're watching on the live stream? And, who is this guy that has a face for radio on the audio stream? But anyway, my name's Toolman Tim, or Tim Cook, you can call me. I'm a husband and a father. I run my own handyman business in East Central Alberta, Canada. I've done so, I would say, successfully for almost 5 years. But, what makes me, and I don't like the term expert because I'm really not. I'm just somebody who's failed more than the average person and learned from his damn mistakes. If you go back to high school and college days, I had no interest in learning how to fix things, how to repair things, how to put shit back together. Not even a little bit. My grandfather, of course, he could rig up absolutely anything there was. he always had little electronic contraptions and stuff. So I hope maybe I inherited a little bit of that from him. But, spent my college years doing the same, facing the books, video games, everything else that I enjoyed, but never really had any interest in repairing or fixing or anything. Did 4 years in university. I got a bachelor's degree in religious studies, and then got out of school and decided to put that to use right away and got a job as a night manager at Dairy Queen. But hey, Ted, nice to see you. Hi, John. Nice to see you. And loved working at Dairy Queen, loved tearing the machines apart, but I found out I got bored really quick. I got offered a job at a local hardware store, and that is where I got my life's education. I remember thinking when the guy offered me the job, I thought, you know what? This is the opportunity for me to learn about how to put a house together or back together or just fix things. Like I felt as a 22, 23-year-old male at the time, I didn't know anything. So I had access to experts. I had access to materials at a really sweet discount, which was great. And I had motivation because the abject poverty that my wife and I were living in right after we bought a 130-year-old home was super good motivation for learning how to fix stuff, how to put stuff back together. We had it was only about 10 feet deep, a little hand dug well. It ran off of a piston pump, and I swear the piston pump come over on the ark with Noah. The thing was older than dirt. And somehow I managed to keep that thing together, changed out some of the packings in it, managed to learn how to cross the points in the pressure switch and all of that. Anyway, so, wanting to be able to fix up an old home, wanting to make it a nice place for my family to live in was awesome. And that was really the motivation where I learned how to fix things, put things back together. And I've just been running with it ever since. So tonight, like I said, is going to be an introduction to the concept of preparedness. It's going to be just the high points of everything that we're going to talk about over the next few weeks. And, every single prepper, if you ask them, would prefer to bug in over bugging out, I would think, because number one, you don't have to haul anything with you. You're already at home. You're already dealing with all your own systems. You're already there. So why not do everything you can to take care of your quote unquote bug in location? And that seems to be something in the preparedness community. I'll talk about this a little later on as well, but we're really good at stocking up on food and water and maybe fuel, maybe ammo, guns, all the fun stuff. But I shouldn't say nobody, but a lot of people don't really think or consider about looking after the place you're going to live in, especially if you got to bug in for a long time. Melinda says, I love the old homes. My favorite homes are the mid-century and Victorian ones. Ours was, I want to say it was Victorian, definitely Victorian in style with some really neat windows, but the place was falling down around us. It reminded me of, the old Tom Hanks movie, the Money Pit. It was a bit like that, but, I learned a ton off of it. So, first off, disclaimer, this isn't, I don't want to give you advice per se. I just want to share with you my personal experience. I want to encourage you guys to experiment on your own. I remember back in the day, and I might have told this story on Preppers Live a while back, but back when the internet was just coming around, I had elderly people. I worked at a library, and I had elderly people who would come in and want to learn how to use the computer. But they'd be scared to death because they were scared they were going to hack into the Pentagon or blow something up or go whole war games or whatever it was. And they were just scared. They needed to be empowered. They needed to be encouraged to experiment, to learn, to fail, and then to get better. And that is what becoming your own handyman or handy woman or handy person is all about. So, and this is the big thing, we always have that lone wolf mentality as a prepper. I can go it alone. And you know what? That's great. Use that as motivation, but it's okay to lean on other people too. But so the first thing about being able to handle all the systems in your home, and this goes for someone who's never even maybe fixed a set of taps, never, framed up a wall, somebody that maybe has never even learned how to, unplug a stuck toilet. So it all starts, handyman is at levels, and you're going to work your way up and up and up, and you're going to learn a little bit more, and you're going to experiment, and you're going to fail, and you're going to do what I did 100 times. And hopefully I can teach you a little bit of stuff so you don't make the same damn mistakes that I made. But so the first thing we got to get rid of the fear. Okay. So what I want to say, and I want to empower you with, is you can't really hurt anything that bad. I'm not saying you can't, but the chances of screwing something up so bad that you can't reverse it, you can't go back and fix it, because that's part of the process of learning all this stuff is, darn it, I screwed up. I got to turn around. I got to haul that wall down because it's, an inch out of square, and we got to reframe the whole thing. I had a friend, she was into rental properties, and I think she said she had to hang her drywall ceiling 3 or 4 times before she got it right. So do your best to get rid of the fear. Part of that, of course, is having emergency processes in place. But if you're going to, now, again, only work on things that you're at least comfortable with, or it's just a little stretch to get started. But before you start all this stuff, know where your emergency power shutoff is, know where your main water shutoff is in your home, know where your emergency gas shutoff is if you happen to have natural gas or propane. If you have furnace oil, for instance, know how to shut that off as well. Melinda says lack of money to pay for an expensive service fee is a great motivator to learn how to do home improvements yourself. You know what? I always joke with the workshop community, they must be peeking at my notes, but Melinda, I swear, I think you are, because I deal with this exact issue a little bit further down. You're absolutely right. Not being able to afford to pay a guy means you got to be the guy or the girl or both, whatever. So know where to shut everything off. Be comfortable with that. Being comfortable, and it doesn't mean Melinda's such a miser. I like that. It doesn't mean not being nervous, and it doesn't mean not hiring somebody once in a while if you absolutely have to. But the whole idea behind learning something is stretching, and stretching's uncomfortable, and it's going to make you just a little bit nervous. But start small. Do little things. If it's something you've never done before, just take a small little step. Like, oh, maybe I have a pinhole leak in a pipe in my basement. I'm going to learn how to plug that or cut it out and replace the fitting. Just the little things, and get some easy wins under your belt. And all of a sudden you'll start getting comfortable. And listen, like I said, I've been a handyman. I've been a full-time handyman for 5 years, and I had never, this is almost embarrassing, I had never touched a piece of siding in my life except to put a piece back up for a customer that had blown off. And this summer, I sided my entire garage and home because I had gradually built up all of these different skills and, the mindset of being able to. Plus, I have a really encouraging wife who's super cool and wants to really encouraging with this kind of stuff. She's like, you could do this, hon. And she was right. And it turned out really good. And Melinda says it pays to buy quality products and tools too. Yes. We're going to talk about a toolbox a little further down here. But like I said, when you're doing this kind of stuff, be prepared to redo projects multiple times. Just accept it. Know that there's a good chance I'm going to screw things up just a little bit, and I'm going to go from there. It's okay. And also, and this is one of my worst, I am my own worst critic. What's Ted say here? You learn more from your mistakes than you ever will from your successes. Isn't that the truth? What do they say? I think knowledge comes from success and wisdom comes from failure. And it's absolutely true, because sometimes if you do something right and you just luck into it, you're going to get overconfident and be like, I knew how to do that. But really, you just got lucky that time. But when you make a mistake and you screw something up, that's when you really learn your lessons. Yeah, YouTube is a great help. That's something I forgot to put. Just do your homework. Yes, Melinda says that as well. YouTube is a great help. I love YouTube University. I literally taught myself how to side my house this summer with YouTube, and something else that's pretty cool is as you go along, one of my big tenets of a preparedness lifestyle is, and maybe not for everybody, but I would say for the majority of people who want independence and freedom, entrepreneurship is a huge avenue toward that independence and freedom. The underground market and the whole works. And becoming a handyman of your own property, and I use that term generically, you could end up turning yourself into being able to lend your skills out to neighboring people, to barter or trade or make money, be independent through entrepreneurship. And that has been my wife and I's key to some form of freedom and independence for sure, is by this exact handyman business and odd jobs and property management and snow removal and doing all the dirty jobs that nobody else wants to do. And a lot of that comes from learning everything that you can about your own home system. And like I said, we're really good at food, ammo, even first aid, but we prep for everything but home repair. Home repair. It's just one of those things that it's always, well, I'll do it. Another one that's like that quite often in the prepper field is gas. It's like, oh, I'll go get myself a sweet generator. I got a tri-fuel generator that'll run the home for, 4 days on a full tank of gas, except we forget to go get gas or we let it go bad or that kind of thing. But it's the same thing, with keeping all of our, without having the right tools or without having the right building supplies, without having, the right caulking or paint or insulation or all of that stuff. And, this isn't really sexy, but man, is it ever important. And one thing, by practicing the idea of preparedness, repairredness, you can end up turning, and I thought this was, this whole idea was you could end up turning, by not practicing preparedness, you can turn a bug in situation into a bug out situation. We try our darndest to cover all the situations, but say for instance, you're at home and say you don't have any way to protect yourself. And all of a sudden half your shingles on the roof of your home blow off and you've got water infiltration coming in like crazy. And your entire idea was to bug in to get through the windstorm. And of course, when we bug out because of a natural disaster, we want to do it ahead of time. We never want to be heading out in the nasty old weather. So if you don't end up doing that, the preparedness, the maintenance ahead of time, having the stuff on hand to at least maybe, and this is a bad idea, but trying to tarp something off in hurricane winds, you may be able to avert needing to leave home. And of course, then packing everything up, taking everything with you, or at least the minimum that you can. And a big thing, a big part of doing this whole mindset of preparedness, repairredness is regular old maintenance. It's the same with vehicles. Oil changes and vehicles go hand in hand, and routine maintenance is the key to keeping your bug in location. And I say bug in location, I mean your home. We can use the term, but keeping it safe, secure, and comfortable. At least as comfortable as you can in a power outage, a loss of heat in the middle of wintertime, a flood, a ruptured water main, a plugged up septic tank. And we're going to deal with all this stuff as time goes on. But yeah, all of that. And, the whole idea behind the routine maintenance is hopefully saving yourself a little bit of grief down the road. And Melinda says, women, here, I'm going to copy and paste this over so you can read it, guys. But yeah, she said, women, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Home ownership is not for the faint of heart. I'm going to bring this up on the live screen video feed here so you guys can read it. But be ready to put in the work. If you're buying up a fixer-upper, absolutely. And it's true. No matter how you slice it, home ownership is not for the faint of heart. You are absolutely true there. It's awesome. It's a great thing. But there's going to be days. I remember the first home that Becky and I bought, and we didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. And our septic system, which we didn't even know how to service at the time, had become completely full and backed up into the downstairs toilet. And we didn't even have the money to hire somebody to come and do it. So we ended up making it work, but that kind of stuff is enough to scare the pants off you. But it's worth it in the long run, especially if you're building equity and building an investment property and building a homestead or somewhere that you can live and make your way through some disasters of some sort. Like I said, routine maintenance, right? If your house isn't insulated well, then you're going to have a way worse time when the power goes out and you lose heat in the middle of winter. Now, if you're like Ted here and you live in Florida, you might be more worried about losing your air conditioning than you are. But if you live where I am, where the air doesn't just hurt your face, it can literally kill you, minus 40, that's where Celsius and Fahrenheit meet. Having a little extra insulation might be the difference between, freezing your butt off and just being really, really cold with that Mr. Buddy heater that you use. That one loose piece of siding on the side of the house, you can end up, if you don't fix it right away, the wind can grab it and it can act like a domino effect and you can lose every bit of siding on the side of your house. And that can be miserable. That branch, I've got a neighbor who I'm seeing a branch the other day that's growing down and it's leaning over the main power line. And you know what? It might not be a big deal until you get a really heavy windstorm, or even worse than that, say 3 or 4 inches of wet, heavy snow, and all of a sudden, boom, down it comes. And that entire situation could have been averted with a little bit of home maintenance. And you know what? You may never know what all of that home maintenance is going to save you, trouble from, but doing it could end up averting you needing to leave the home or dealing with a much worse situation for sure. How about, this is a good one for my area, but that third 12-inch dumping of snow in 2 weeks, and you think, you know what? I don't need to get the roof rake out. And if you don't know what a roof rake is, just be thankful you don't. But we have them here, and sometimes we have to rake off our roofs because we get too much snow. And if it gets too bad, I mean, it's designed for snow load up there. But, if your roof's a little bit saggy or whatever, all of a sudden, you might have an igloo in the middle of your living room because you didn't get out there and clean it off after the second snowfall. And no guarantee that home maintenance is ever going to prevent a bad situation. But I can promise you, if you don't take the time to do a little bit of that stuff, the chances are significantly higher that you're going to have a bad day down the road. Something simple as a dirty filter in your furnace can restrict your airflow, can end up burning out your blower motor because it has to work harder. And then all of a sudden, you know what? A simple $10 air filter that you could have replaced has now turned into a $500 to $700 service call on a Sunday because it's Easter and the plumbing and heating guy doesn't want to have to come out. But, changing your filters on a regular basis can be helpful. Keeping yourself an extra blower motor on hand, which if that intimidates you, we'll talk about it down the road, but it's not nearly as difficult to replace as one might think. Keeping an extra V-belt on hand for your blower motor as well. Something else, a ton of things. And I know as preppers, we love to have lists. We love to have gear that we can buy. But home maintenance stuff, it's not so exciting. Although I sound pretty excited when I talk about it. But having all this stuff on hand is huge. I keep a couple extra belts on hand for my ride-on lawnmower simply because if I have to order them, who knows how long they could take to get here. Oh yeah, we got all kinds of good stuff here. Melinda says insurance companies are now using drones to check homes for roof repairs, trees that may fall on your house, any repairs or problems that may cause them an insurance claim. They'll send you a letter to make the repair or face cancellation. I don't even know what to think about that whole situation. I mean, a drone is a great tool, and I've thought about using them to inspect eaves troughs. That's what we call gutters up here. Or I've even seen some neat things about, doing away with hornets' nests. And I have a neat contraption with a shop vac I use for that. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that. John says, I really hope I never live somewhere that a roof rake is a thing. Just be thankful. I honestly, here on the prairies, we don't get that many dumpings of snow, but it does get really, really cold. But first year I was running my handyman business, I had to do that for a few customers. And sometimes you got to break up the ice too, but it's usually a foot or two of snow. You guys will hear me over the next few months, especially the new community, the PBN network here. You're going to hear Ted says he loves talking home maintenance. I'm excited. I got talking to James about this whole concept, and there's two things, well, more than two things, but two of the things in the world that I am passionate about, and that is home maintenance and prepping. And if you can put those two together, I believe I have found my niche, ladies and gentlemen, because this is something that I love to share with you. And you know what? Ask me any and all questions you ever want down the road through social media. Doesn't matter. If I don't know, I will find out for you. And I'm also not going to bullshit you and tell you I don't, I'll make something up. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to tell you. That's the way it is. Anyway, one of the mantras of my teaching on preparedness is 3 words. Preparedness is prevention. And it's absolutely true. Prevention always seems costly at the time. When you pull into the oil change place and, for my truck, it's just over $100 to change it out with synthetic. That seems, I don't know. It just seems a little bit expensive. Sure, it does, right? But that's a heck of a lot cheaper than, a $10,000 engine job because you ignored the oil light for 10 years and ended up losing your engine, that kind of stuff. And something else is surround yourself with people that you can learn and ask questions from. This is super important. This was something, and not everybody's going to get a full-time job selling building supplies and, assembling products at a hardware store like I did. But, and that made it easy for me. I had access to plumbers, electricians, pipe fitters, furnace repair guys, and they would literally always take the time to answer my questions because they knew I could give them a deal on materials, and you know how it works. But anyway, so I always had access to these people. And if you don't, obviously if you don't work at a hardware store, there's plenty of other ways to find like-minded folk that you can learn from. A few years ago, I'd never done metal roofing, metal siding before. And I got talking to a customer that I did some work for, and he's like, well, actually, I've got to put metal siding on a new outbuilding that I'm building. And he said, would you like to help me? And I said, sure. He goes, well, I'll pay you. And I said, listen, you don't need to pay me. But he did anyway. And you know what? I got paid to learn a new skill. I did property management for a guy, and he super, super handy. Intrepid Commander says, Toolman Tim sounds great. Thank you, sir. This guy was, handy enough. And another job I had never done before was vinyl flooring, cushion floor, or oilcloth, whatever you want to call it. And I said, you know what? I'll work for you. And again, he's like, I'll pay you. And so I spent the weekend laying vinyl flooring with him. And now I've done 4 or 5 jobs on my own simply because I surrounded myself with someone else who had the skill, had the knowledge and the skill, and was willing to put up with my crap for the weekend so that I could learn it. That is the best way. I love YouTube University. I love learning online, but all that is knowledge, and applied knowledge along with a few mistakes and screw ups becomes wisdom. And wisdom is practical knowledge where you've actually used it and done it. And that's the idea behind surrounding yourself with people who know, or, who are a little bit slightly handier than you are. And like I've said, us preppers, we love the lone wolf mentality. We love to go it alone. But, one of my favorite community members, Ken Cornelius, if you talk to him, he lives in the woods with just him and his wife, and you picture the lone wolf mentality. And the other day he just posted a story on social media about how his neighbor's septic system, I believe it collapsed. It was the old style clay pipe. And he went down on a moment's notice with his excavator and helped him fix it up. So right there, that's surrounding yourself with people that know what they're doing. That's learning from other people. That's building a community, and that's learning new skills. And so, that kind of stuff blows me away. And you have to look around, and it doesn't matter whether you live in the inner city, the suburbs, or out in rural country where your nearest neighbor is 50 miles away. It still helps to be able to find yourself some like-minded individuals who also know how to fix things and are willing to teach you just a little bit. So where do we start? Well, we're a half hour in, so we've obviously already started. But as the week goes on, this series is going to break down all the systems of the home. And there's a lot of them. But, things like plumbing, and we're even going to break plumbing down into a couple different sections. One, just water lines, and then another one, sewer, because sewer can be a real shitty situation. And pardon the pun. But we're going to take the time and we're going to talk about the skills that you can learn, the material that you need to have on hand, the preventative maintenance that you can do to keep all these going. And when I first started beating the idea around in my head and talked to James, I thought maybe, I might have enough material for 4 or 5 weeks of doing this. And then I started putting stuff on paper. And, when I talked to James the other day, it was like 15. And I bet you I could do 20 weeks on just this topic. I don't want you guys to get bored of me, but we are going to do a deep, deep dive. And Mr. Chris Dixon, a fellow Albertan Flatlander, just showed up as well. Nice to see you, sir. But we're going to do a deep, deep dive, and we are going to hopefully prepare you to take part in preparedness, and it doesn't matter what level of handy you are or unhandy you are, we can always improve. Like I said, this entire process of getting into the idea of preparedness, really, for those of you who can see me, 3 steps. The first is skills, and that's knowledge and experience. Knowledge would be, hey, chicken hawk, shit rolls downhill, he says. Number 1 rule of plumbing. Ain't that the truth? And if it doesn't, you're in trouble. Man, we've got a big crowd tonight. Nice to see you, little Klondike. We got a ton of people in here. And so first off, knowledge. And knowledge would be, watching somebody change out a wax seal on the bottom of a toilet. And the first time you might see that, that might seem damn intimidating, just miserable intimidating. It just doesn't look fun. It looks difficult, the whole works. Then comes experience. So the first bit is, in the skills section that breaks down to knowledge, learning. So watching a video or watching someone else doing it. And then of course, experience. And that's when we actually do one. That's the first time you decide, I'm not calling a plumber because I have a pinhole leak at the bottom of my toilet. And I'm going to learn how to take those bolts out, flip that toilet over, and scrape that nasty old wax seal off the bottom of that toilet. And then I'm going to get myself a new wax seal and a new set of brass bolts, because Tim told me that if I'm going to replace the seal, I really should replace those bolts because they get corroded up real bad. And that's where the experience comes in. And then, so skills is first, supplies is second, and that's tools and materials. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight about having a real basic, well-stocked toolbox, but also having enough building materials on hand to deal with the worst, or sorry, not the worst, but the most common situations. I'm a numbers guy. So for me, and of course we all have a limited budget. And so to figure out where to spend our money on looking after our home and building our preps, always prep for the most likely scenario, the thing that's going to happen to you, the thing that happens the most often in your area. And that's what we're going to do. When we build up our preps on building materials and supplies, caulking, all that, we are going to build it around whatever needs to happen in your area first. It's great to think about building a Faraday cage to protect all your electronics from an EMP. But what's way more practical? Investing in putting together a blackout kit to deal with the 4 or 5 blackouts you have every single year in your area. And we got a couple cool tips here. Little Klondike says, use straws to line up the bolts. And you've just saved me a ton of time. This is incredible. I struggle with that all the time. Of course, I pick up the toilet and I try to drop it down into place. And then one bolt goes sideways, the other bolt goes the other way. And then you push it down and you get wax all over the threads. And absolutely. And Melinda over on the EOC, that is the internal live chat for PBN. And if you guys want to check that out, I can give you all the instructions on that as well. Melinda says, if the wax seal is ignored for too long, a floor may need to be replaced. Yep. Absolutely true. I got a rental across the road from me that I've had to look after over the years. And it was an absolute mess because it had a leaky wax seal. And it also had a really nice leaky vent line that leaked sewer gas back into the home. Never a good thing. And Ted says, I've been using the Better Than Wax lately. Have been impressed so far. I got to check those out. So my opinion on a wax seal is the thicker, the better, because you can always squish them down into place. So if you ever need to replace a wax seal on a toilet, guys, buy the thickest one. The one I always buy is called the Max Wax Seal. And it's thick, it's about 2 inches thick, and it has a vinyl sleeve on the inside that helps, how do you want to put this? Contain the solids and liquids down into the hole. Yeah, so that's the best one I've been able to find. And without going too far, well, that's a good question. I wonder if Ted knows. So Melinda wants to know what the average life of a wax seal is. If it's not disturbed and it doesn't get water into it, and you do it's a really good flat installation, they'll last a long time. I've seen some that are really old. And then I've seen some that for whatever reason, I've got another rental I look after, that it doesn't matter how many times we've installed them, tried, they just keep seeming to let go. And I've even seen people who've taken a Max Wax seal and then taken a thin one and put it on top and doubled it up. And I don't know what you want to call it, but then I just sit on the toilet and shimmy my butt back and forth until everything settles down into place. And when I do that, it seems to settle. And then, of course, don't over tighten your bolts. You want them tight, but geez, if you over tighten them, you're going to end up breaking the porcelain, and that's going to be a bad day. So skills, that's knowledge and experience. Supplies, that's tools and materials. And service, that's ongoing and preventative. Let's try this again. Ongoing, preventative, and pre-disaster maintenance. I like my alliteration. You're going to find that out as we go along too. But this one is like, and again, like we talked about, it's changing out an air filter or replacing a missing shingle before you need to. and then that's preventative maintenance. That's pretty straightforward. And a big one that a lot of people don't always talk about, although Prepper Dad did the other night in his windstorm episode of his podcast, and that is pre-disaster maintenance. And that's a big thing. My dad instilled that into me quite a bit, especially growing up on the East Coast. We didn't always get hurricanes, but we always got the tail end of hurricanes as well. So we get a lot of nasty old wind. And so pre-disaster maintenance, and you guys, I mean, this makes sense, but if you've got some real nasty windstorms or a big snowstorm on its way, one thing you can do, of course, is the day before, get your generator out, make sure it's running. And of course, hopefully it hasn't been a year since you ran it last. Generator should be run at least quarterly. Put fuel stabilizer in it, put a load on it to test all of your outlets, the whole works. But so pre-disaster, I hate the word disaster because it sounds so big, but this could be a personal disaster too. But if you know weather's coming for a power outage, well, you're going to pull out the generator. You're going to test it. Okay. You got a big, nasty windstorm coming. Well, what are you going to do? Anything that's not bolted down, you're going to fold it up and put it in the garage, because the last thing you want is one of those, $200 beautiful folding chairs that you just bought going right through that picture window you installed, And so that kind of stuff, to me, is very important. And it's not always something that we think about. And Ted says, I want to answer Melinda's question here. I've seen them well over 50 years. Depends on how well the toilet was set. I figure I like deferring to Ted on some of this stuff because he has done a lot of stuff with it. But that is absolutely, yeah. And that's the way like I said, I've seen some wax seals that, have been on there for, a decade or more. And then I've seen some that haven't lasted a year. And it has a lot to do with, like I said, how level the floor is, how non-rotten it is, just, whether it was set properly, whether it was on an angle, the whole works. And we'll get into that. And I may even start doing a few YouTube videos on some of this stuff as well, or at least maybe create a private playlist, or, definitely going to turn this entire series into a book series down the road. I just love to make my goals public, because then it forces me to put my money where my mouth is, right? So each week we're going to take a look at the skills, the supplies, and the service for all these different home maintenance systems of your bug-in location. And I got to share this one right quick. Chris Dixon says, I love this concept, Tim. Things look so overwhelming until you do it. And, the old politically incorrect saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you do the Appalachian Trail? Well, one step at a time. And that is exactly how, most times I start a project not even knowing how to finish it. That might sound stupid or foolish, but this is how I work. I figure my brain's going to figure out how to finish a project. And what I do is I learn the skill that I need to get started. I master that, I work on that, and then I learn the next skill that's needed along the way. And Melinda says some of the clues that a replacement is needed: smell, and of course, water seepage. Oh, yes. And that can be hard to see sometimes, because if it's just a little bit of water, you might think, old hubby was up in the middle of the night using the bathroom and didn't pay attention. Or, sometimes I've seen where you're not quite sure if that's a little bit of water or if it's just shiny caulking that's down there. But, take an old rag or a towel, wipe it up. And of course, if the floor is getting a bit spongy there, you got to do it. Yes, Brian from the Lots Project, I'll bring that one up. It says plan, then figure as you go. Absolutely. I make sure I know everything I can about the first step, and then, or maybe the first 3 or 4 steps. But a lot of times I don't exactly know how I'm going to finish the project. I just learn the skills as I go along. And that was what I did this summer with the vinyl siding. I learned how to make sure the starter strip was level, how to put the starter strip on. Then I moved to the corners and then the siding, and you develop the skill set as you go. A good base is good, but you go from there. So like I said, we're going to learn about skills, supplies, and service, all about the different systems. Oh, Tim, there's another S. Why'd you do it? Anyway, so some of the ones we're going to look at, I got a whole bunch, but I wanted to share, the main ones. Like I said, water. So that'll be like your water coming into your house. And your sewer, well, that's all that other fun stuff heading out. Years ago, it's a funny story, and I got to share it with you since we've been talking about septics. But again, abject poverty, right? We didn't have a lot of money at all. And I'm sure the statute of limitations has passed on this. But that 130-year-old home also wasn't even a septic system. It was what they called I don't know, a cesspool or an open, anyway, it was basically an open tank built out of railway ties across the street, and it ran under the main road, and the pipe was the old octagon shaped clay pipe. I think they were like 2 or 3 foot sections. They looked like old chimney liner, and they had run under the road for years. And it was, anyway, we moved into the home. We thought the inspection passed. We were using everything for a week or two, and then all of a sudden the toilets wouldn't flush. And I go into the basement and everything had backed up. And so our options were hiring a great big company to come in and try to snake under there and put a new line in. But we had an open tank that just went down into the bank on the other side, or hiring somebody to dig up the main road, none of which was even remotely close to our budget. Or another fun one would be to get a government sanctioned septic system, including all the necessary permitting and the tens of thousands of dollars of infrastructure work. And we couldn't do it. And again, desperation spurred us on to learning how to do this kind of stuff. And I got talking to a buddy, and he's like, listen, you live in the country, not a big deal. We'll rent a tractor. We'll buy 4 well rings. That's those cement ones for dug wells. We'll rent a core driller, and we'll buy a few lengths of straight pipe and perforated pipe. And we built an entire septic system for $1,500, and it worked for a few years. It worked so well, we never even had to have it pumped out, and we had a family of 7. So never a smell, never a leak, never contaminated anything. It was a wonderful system. And that, again, was by surrounding myself with other people who knew what they were doing, having some motivation, and being willing to learn. So yeah, we got water, sewer. We'll deal with electrical. Heating's a huge one, especially if you live where the air can kill you. Hot water, another one. Appliances, that's another one that we don't think about. And some people might say, well, what do I need to do? I don't need appliances. If an EMP knocks out the weather, or knocks out all electronics, well, I'll be cooking on my wood stove. We'll talk about that kind of stuff. But more realistically is, you are ready to cook Thanksgiving dinner on a Saturday night, and the baking element goes in your oven. Do you know how to replace it? It sounds super intimidating. And if you can use a screwdriver, you can probably do it. And like Ted says, and the right tools always makes the job easier and more fun. And Melinda says foundation repairs are also very expensive. Yep. I've got one in my house I need to do, and I've been putting it off. We're going to see. Yeah, it's a big job. We get water infiltration a couple of times a summer, but we'll see. So hot water, appliances, and then one I like to call exterior structure. So that's your windows, your doors, your siding, your shingles, all of that. And then the exterior property, that's separate again. And that, might be a little bit of a stretch for, not really, but, it falls under the umbrella of home maintenance because, trimming your hedges, trimming your trees, keeping the limbs away, all of that kind of stuff, keeping it trimmed back, that can keep you from having, maybe losing your home to a wildfire, or again, having a overloaded branch with snow coming through your picture window, all of that kind of stuff. And a couple other ones we'll touch on down the road. Automotive preparedness, that is huge. There's so much that we can do, at least in maintenance and keeping things on hand, that, I guess if we do need to leave our bug in location and bug out at some point, then we've got the automotive, hopefully, a small stockpile of supplies that we can, things like fuses, and learn how to change a windshield wiper, and an extra bottle of washer fluid, and all of your main fluids, a tire repair kit, all of that kind of stuff. And a couple other ones that we'll probably deal with is a vacation property, or we call it a bug out location, right, guys? But, I'm a big fan of, everything needs to have a daily use if I'm going to buy it for preparedness. Don't forget chimney and roof, Melinda says. Absolutely. I spent a lot of years heating with wood heat, and we'll do a deep dive into chimney repair. That's something my dad did a lot of and taught me a few things on. But yeah, we're going to look at, bug out locations, vacation properties. I say that like it's some big fancy, but if you're going to, even if you're going to have a hunting cabin, there's a certain amount of preparedness that you're going to need to do on a regular basis. And the stuff you keep on hand to repair that is going to be different than the stuff you keep on hand to look after your primary residence. And then, you know what? We may even do one on rental living because, my first few years as a quote unquote adult, I rented and I had to learn a lot. There's a lot of things that you can do that can make your property manager, landlord's life a lot easier, but can also get you by. You obviously don't want to, tear walls down and things like that, but there's a ton of things that people who rent can do as preventative maintenance and as, keep small items on hand to make minor repairs that can make their life a lot better in the short term and the long term as well. Yeah. And then we're going to deal with disasters and damage. It's going to sound like you guys remember the old Captain Planet when they all set out like their wind, water, and all that. Well, the four main ones, I kind of put them into four categories and haven't decided if we'll do a different show on each or not. Kind of depends, but we got water. So that's, flooding, rain, all of that kind of, also burst pipes, that kind of stuff. Fire, that's a tough one. We do deal with that here. We deal more with the wildfire smoke, but it's definitely something we need to contend with for sure. Wind, miserable old wind. I love it, but it, dries everything out here on the prairies. And there's nothing worse than a damaging wind to just ruin a weekend or, cost you thousands and thousands of dollars. And then this will be Ted's favorite because, snow. We just had what was supposed to be about a 4-inch dumping turned into about a 6-inch dumping with 50-mile-an-hour winds, somewhere in the 40 to 50-mile-an-hour winds. And it wasn't so bad. If it was on the flat without wind, it wouldn't have been bad, but we had drifts. This is the worst I'd seen it for people getting stuck in town. And again, being able to deal with these natural happenstances and disasters going to be an important aspect of the whole mantra of preparedness for sure. So that leads us to kind of the final area that I wanted to chat with you tonight. This, like I said, was going to be an overview of the basics of being able to look after your primary bug-in location, your home, the place where you live. Because like I said, as preppers, I love, good old prepper porn where you read the story and the guy decides, well, the best thing for us and our family is to bug out in the woods and to live off of my, wildcraft skills and being able to, build a hammock out of twigs and all, great. And if that is your hobby, I'm never going to begrudge you. And if you want to learn that, great. But why wouldn't a person want to invest their time and energy into the place that in 90 to 95% of the disasters, you're going to want to stay because your family's going to be more comfortable there. Your all of your gear is already there. You already know the systems of the location where you are. And now, if you've got a massive flood coming toward you or a huge forest fire, yeah, you got to get out. But 95% of the time, the best option is to bug in. We just talked about this on the Sunday night live stream of the workshop podcast. And so why not spend some time, some energy, and maybe some money on looking after your main property? And so to do that, we're not going to talk a lot about what materials to have on hand tonight, but I did think that we would at least talk about putting together a bare basics toolbox. So I in consultation with the workshop community, I put out a post on social a few weeks ago and we talked about what are the items that a prepper needs to have in their toolbox, or a handyman or somebody that wants to do the basics of, every little job around the house. And so I didn't want to get into too much technical, high-end expensive tools, but I did need to have, I first started out with, I'm thinking, okay, what would be the 8 tools? And I couldn't put it together in 8. I thought, how about 10? Nope. So I ended up settling on 15, 14 tools plus a toolbox. So, 15 items. Those were the 15 that I thought any beginner or even somebody, an intermediate level handy person would need on hand and could get most jobs done with what I list. And now let the debate begin, because I'm sure there's going to be people who are going to say, wow, I don't know. I think Tim's wrong on this. And you know what? Cool. I'd love to hear it and share your suggestions on what you think. Melinda says, oh my, I need a pole barn for all the stuff I would like to add to my preps. Yep. I had to turn an old cistern into a downstairs pantry at my house here simply to find more room. So I feel your pain. But so, looking into preparedness and home preparedness, maintenance, that kind of stuff. Here's where I started. This was the list I put together. And I had a huge list. I thought, you know what? We'll split it up and we'll do some more down the road into building a bigger toolbox and that kind of stuff. But got to have a hammer. I mean, what can't a person do with a hammer? It's a persuasion bar. It'll tap things into place. It'll tear things apart. It'll help you board up your windows if a hurricane's on its way. There's literally the first buy it for life tool I ever bought was a hammer, which I just recently misplaced and I'm rather sad about. But there is literally no toolbox on this planet, if it's for maintenance, that shouldn't have at least a hammer. And the next thing's a pry bar. And a pry bar is worth its weight in gold. And they're usually pretty light anyway, but that means it's not worth a whole lot. But, great for hauling nails out, great for prying bars out, great for lifting things. So say you got to lift up something simple like, you know what? Every time I put a heavy pot on my electric stove, it wobbles. And, it looks like it's on the Titanic or something. So if you put a little chunk of 2x4 down and put a pry bar under it and then pry up your stove a little, you can actually do that with one hand and adjust the foot with the other. So a pry bar, it has a multitude of uses. And it also can work as like a demolition claw if you need to haul a wall down or something. But then a tape measure. This, is important. None of them fancy dancy metric units, just straight up freedom units for me. Inches. Everybody says, "Oh, Tim, you live in Canada, you must use a metric system." Well, kinda. That was the East Wing hammer, Ted, that you're asking about. I'm really, really sad actually, because that was my first ever expensive tool I bought. But yeah, so got to have a tape measure, and like I said, something that you know how to use. And now I'm speaking from experience, but buying the best quality tool you can buy is worth it. And if anybody's looking for recommendations, check the shop section out over at toolmantim.co. I've listed a lot of what I use. I haven't got everything up there yet, but there's affiliate links. So if you want to know what I use and what's worked for me, you can check it out. But, a good quality tape measure, because a bad quality tape measure, you're going to have a bad day. But pretty much any project you ever need to do, you're going to need some way to measure it for sure. And then a multi-bit screwdriver. My parents, they have, I think it's still in there, the same bright green translucent multi-bit screwdriver that's been in there since, well, they got married in the 70s. And I'm sure it came, I'm guessing it came with either mom or dad when they got married. And that thing is indispensable. I don't know how many times another mantra I live by is always fix a loose screw. Because if you fix it before it falls out, you're saving yourself a lot of trouble. And I'd love to say buy yourself an entire screwdriver kit, but if you're getting started, if you live in a rental or you're just kind of just getting new into the whole preparedness, home maintenance thing, a good one, I like mine's a 7-in-1, I believe. It's the Milwaukee. Spend $20 or $25 on one of those, and it'll get you by. And then if you don't have a damn good flashlight, it's hard to call yourself a prepper, but you got to have a flashlight. I love a good headlamp because it allows me to work and do stuff and still have my two hands free. I specialize in doing dirty jobs. That sounds kind of weird, but a lot of times I used to do a lot anyway, is the gross jobs that people didn't want to do. And one of them is climbing underneath the mobile homes when there's a pipe leak, or in my area, when the pipes are frozen up. And it's really important to be able to have two hands free to be able to wipe the cobwebs out of your face and brush the spiders away when you're down there working. But, a good flashlight or a good headlamp, super important, and get yourself some rechargeable batteries for that. But that's another story. Get yourself a good socket set. There's so much. Sockets are awesome. About 15 years ago, my wife bought me one of these fancy laser engraved Stanley sets. And you know what? Those sockets will outlive me. The case might not, the little plastic hinges are starting to wear. But if you're putting together yourself just a beginner's basic prepper's toolbox, you got to have a good socket set. And now this was one I debated on a lot, but you got to have a hacksaw. I thought about a handsaw, but to me, a hacksaw is a little more versatile tool when you're first getting started. And it's something you're going to use, I think, more often. But man, the uses for a hacksaw. I mean, you can cut your plastic pipe, you can cut metal pipe, you can cut wood. I showed up to I got a customer that I put plastic on the outside of his mobile home windows, and all he wants is wood screwed to the plastic to keep it down. It's not pretty, but it works. And I forgot to bring my handsaw, but I did have my little tiny Milwaukee hacksaw. And you know what? For 1-inch boards, it'll still do it. Chris says standard and metric stuff is built overseas. Oh, yes. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. So if you guys are putting together IKEA furniture, you got to have metric. But yes, thank you, Chris. I never thought to mention that. If you're buying yourself a good socket set, make sure it has both standard and metric, because half the stuff comes in, and the stuff made in China, a lot of that is metric. The last one I had, it had some kind of weird, they tried to turn metric into imperial, and I ended up having like 5/14 of an inch or something like that. It was the weirdest thing. But yeah, make sure you have yourself some metric stuff. A good set of Allen keys, but that didn't make the list this time. So that'll be in the next set of stuff. An adjustable wrench, man, in a pinch, an adjustable wrench can work as a hammer as well. I'm just kind of kidding. But again, maybe don't spend all your money on a full-on wrench set when you're getting started, but put together get a good quality adjustable wrench. One of the medium-sized ones, because you want to start getting into doing your own plumbing. There's so many things that you need a wrench for. And just, even if we're going to do a little automotive maintenance, it's great to have. From there, utility knife. I love my Milwaukee Fastback, but it doesn't matter what you have. Just get yourself a good quality metal or heavy-duty plastic one. I mean, that's great for opening packages, so you don't have to, use your good neck knife for opening Amazon boxes like I do. But, cutting yourself poly to tape off windows if you got a broken window, cutting shingles if you got to put a new shingle up, cutting vinyl siding with an X-Acto knife or a utility knife. There's 1,000 uses, but to me, that is the tool I have to have. And I love the Milwaukee Fastbacks. There's a lot of good ones out there, but put a utility knife in there. And then this is the only power tool that I had in the list, but I put an impact driver. Now, some people might say a drill, some people might say a circular saw, but to me, a compact impact driver, if you're careful with it, is the best of all the worlds. It's quick to load. It's quick to put your bits in, quick to take your bits out. You can buy drill bits for it. It'll allow you to drive screws. It'll allow you to drill holes. It'll allow you to put nut drivers in and put nuts on, take bolts out. Just be careful with it. I put Allen keys in mine to assemble IKEA furniture. Just don't over torque them, because it doesn't take much to wreck. Melinda says, Allen wrenches, a rubber mallet, and a Sawzall. Absolutely. Now, all three of those I think are in my extended list. We're not going to go through all that tonight, because I didn't want to bore you guys. I didn't want to turn this into the tool list show. So, but the 15. So an impact driver, got to. Now this one might be a bit of a cheat, because it sure as hell isn't going to fit in your toolbox, but I put an extension ladder. I really went back and forth, and that's why this list got a little bit long. But when I first started working on my own in the handyman business, I had a 20-foot aluminum ladder that was like grade 7. They don't really make a 7, but it was as thin as cardboard. And if you had it fully extended and I was up on it and my, medium-sized butt was on there, it felt like it wanted to bend in half. And there are so many times that you need to get up on something or up to something to deal with, whether it's cleaning your gutters as preventative maintenance, or replacing shingle, or cleaning your chimney. A good quality ladder. I mean, you've only got one of you. And if you got a shitty ladder and it ends up breaking and falling down, you need to make sure you've got something you can work with. Next one I put was a torpedo level. If you guys don't know what those are, they're little like 6-inch levels. They're a great thing to throw in a toolbox. They're great when you're hanging pictures for the missus. They're great for building fences or retaining walls, when you just want to get it just in place, that kind of stuff. And I love a compact, and I'm trying to keep this basic list for you guys as accessible and semi-inexpensive as can be, but torpedo levels aren't super expensive, and they're good to have. And then a good set of driver bits. Don't skimp on driver bits. I used to we have a store up here called Crappy Tire. No, it's not. It's Canadian Tire, but we call it Crappy Tire. And, for Christmas, they'll have like the 1,750 drill bit set, or the 12,000 screwdriver bit sets for like $22. And what ends up happening is that, drill, the bit set ends up having 1,700 1/8-inch bits, and then 3 of the bits you really need. And they dull out quick and they break in half. And that's the same with the crappy driver bits. Don't get those, that silver gray crappy stuff. Get yourself some good carbide ones, some with a thin shaft that are made to run on impact drivers. But get yourself find a kit that has all the different screws you're going to need and use them. Pick up a nice little, I like something that is enclosed in a carrying case because I like to have everything combined and know where it is. And then this one might seem odd, but a Sharpie. I originally wanted to say a pencil because you always got to mark on things. But when I'm doing construction, if I'm going to mark something that's going to be cut or, that's going to be shown, sure, I'll use a pencil. But I use a Sharpie 9 times out of 10. And they're just great. I mean, whether you're cutting plastic or vinyl, wood, doesn't matter. But when you put a Sharpie mark on something, it stays there. Get yourself a good quality one with a nice fine tip. That'll make it work. And then, like I said, a toolbox. So 14 tools, 13 tools that'll fit in the toolbox, and then get yourself a good quality toolbox, because part of being a prepper and part of being prepared is being organized. And this is something I was deadly bad at for a lot of years. But if you need your drill, you need to know where your friggin' drill is. And if your drill is in your toolbox and your toolbox is always on your workbench, and all of a sudden you need, or how about your adjustable wrench? Say you've got a fitting that's leaking in your basement and flooding everywhere and you need it. Well, you know what? If you can go to your garage and you can find your toolbox and you can put your hand on your toolbox and pull your wrench out, you're all set. But if you got to spend 20 minutes looking for it and you still don't find it, and then you got to run to the store and buy one, well, you weren't prepared and you end up making a small inconvenience into a massive issue. So, and then a few pieces of safety gear. We'll kind of go over this quick, but safety glasses. This is something I learned one time years ago. The doctor looked at me when I was in outpatients for the second time, the emergency room for the second time in a week, with sawdust and debris in my eyes because I was such a dumbass. I didn't wear safety glasses. Get yourself a good pair of safety sunglasses so you can work outdoors. Protect your eyes, because what did I say? Preparedness is prevention. And if you can prevent an accident from happening, way better than having a first aid kit that you have to react to something. Gloves. I am miserable for gloves. Almost cut the end of my finger off with a utility knife one time when I was cutting poly. I was driving a dump truck and we had to line the bottom, and I put my hand down and then went shoop right over my finger. So have yourself some good gloves and ear protection. Got to have ear protection, especially when you're working around gas material or like gas powered equipment and stuff. Then a dust mask. I've been bad for that over the years, but we got to look after our lungs. We only have one set, and a lot of these old houses, sometimes they got asbestos, but even if they don't, you're dealing with mold and dust. Like when I go underneath the trailers, you got to have something. Headlamp I mentioned before, and then a good first aid kit. Got to have, we may end up talking about a preparedness first aid kit down the road, because to me, that's something you got to have. I mean, electrical tape works really good as a Band-Aid, but you got to have more than that, at least a little. Burns are pretty common when you're working around equipment. A guy that worked for me a few years ago, push mower, went to load it up on the trailer, put his hand right on the muffler and pushed it right in, and had a perfectly circle burn on his hand for quite some time. And we didn't have a first aid kit on hand. We had to run back to my place to treat it. So that kind of stuff, definitely. Oh yes, Ted says, watch that silica. Yeah, silica dust, miserable. I mean, you'd never want to get it in your lungs, but it's so irritating. So yeah, that was kind of the bare minimum. I had to get some safety gear in there because I'm a bit of a safety nerd, even though if you ask my wife, I don't always follow what I should, but it is important. So yeah, down the road, we'll do a second edition of expanding your preparedness toolbox. I put together a whole list. I got like 50 items. So we may do like a kind of a fun, 50 more items you need to have in your preparedness toolbox today, that kind of stuff. But I didn't want to kill you with lists, but yeah. So that, hopefully guys, we talked about the skills, the supplies, and the service. We're going to talk about all the systems of the home. We're going to talk about the different disasters. We may even talk about cleaning up after disasters, and, just keeping your home, your bug-in location running smoothly when, the shit hits the fan, or you just have, your own personal SHTF situation when either the handyman, the plumber, help just isn't around the corner, or maybe help isn't in the pocketbook and you're not able to afford to get help. So you end up needing to do it yourself. And that's okay. And independence is a trait for a prepper. It's something we look at as I guess a good thing. We do need to surround ourselves with like-minded people to learn from, but being able to look after you, your family, and your dwelling in an emergency situation, to me, is as almost as important as having all the other areas like food and water and protection and first aid. It should just go hand in hand with all that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this week. If you got any questions, I can definitely stick around for a few minutes and answer them for you for sure. Just to get a couple more things out of the way as we're closing up, though, guys. First off, tune in next week. So next Thursday, we'll have the second edition of Preparedness. We're going to talk about water, just the water coming into the house, not that shitty stuff heading out. If you guys want to follow more about what I'm doing, I also have a Sunday night live stream podcast on YouTube. And this week, it's really cool. I've got an absolute thanks, Intrepid Commander. I really appreciate it. He says, "This was awesome, Tim. Good stuff. Looking forward to the future shows." I appreciate it. I was like a little kid in a candy store. I could not wait to get on here and talk about it. But so Sunday night, I have a certified veterinarian coming on my live stream to talk about pets, animals, livestock, and preparedness. She's going to take questions, all of that. Thank you, Melinda. I appreciate the great show. Appreciate it so much. Yeah, so if you want to join me over there, link will be in the show notes for sure. Yeah, and for people in my workshop community, if you want to know more about James and all the other creators here on the Preparedness Broadcast Network, I put a pinned link in tonight's interaction, the comments, that kind of stuff. It'll be in all my video descriptions going forward. But it's all I love it. I appreciate the opportunity. And so now that I'm in a regular schedule on here, I can let you guys know about the next show coming up on the Prepper Broadcast Network. Sounds so official. I love it. Anyway, so if you want to keep going with the top quality preparedness content, you can tune in tomorrow for The Strange Truth with Carl A.D. Brown, published author, really cool dude. I've listened to some of his stuff. It's a lively discussion centered around Christianity, preparedness, and this is the cool part, news stories that no one else wants to touch. So thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Thanks, Ted. I appreciate it. And guys, as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.